Hello, my name's Stu and I would like to introduce you to the Rodenstock 105 float lens. Its real name is the Rodenstock, it's easy to say, Rodenstock HR Digaron Macro 105 5.6. This is a Formula 1 of macro lenses. What makes this lens so good is most macro lenses are designed to give you very good results at the sort of less than 1 meter range, and it is always a compromise. The amazing thing about this lens, whilst it will give you excellent results from infinity closer, it will outperform all of the competition at the range of less than 1 meter, and it does that through floating lens elements. So you see that the lens, which is just this bit on the end of this bellows, you see that the lens has what appears to be an aperture ring and a focusing mount. It isn't actually a focusing ring. It allows you to move the optical layout inside the lens in order to optimize the resolution of the lens for your actual reproduction ratio. So for instance, if I was using this, it's a very old Nikon bellows, which has been sort of cobbled together with a Nikon camera, so a 35mm full frame camera. If I were going to focus on something that is at 1:1, most macro lenses aren't tuned for 1:1. They will focus at 1:1 maybe, but they're not tuned for 1:1. This lens allows you to, by rotating the dial till you get to a 1:1 ratio, it will allow the optical elements inside to be fine-tuned for that ratio. Now, you might not be shooting at 1:1, you might be shooting at 4:1 or 3:1, and it sometimes could be tricky to actually work out your reproduction ratio, but they make it easy. The reproduction ratio varies according to the camera format, and this lens, which has a big image circle, will work with multiple formats, which we'll come back to in a moment. You can download these little charts, and you download the appropriate one for your image format. So in this case, this is for 35mm. If, for instance, if you can imagine, if I was going to photograph say a 35mm negative on, say, a light box with this digital SLR, I would fill the frame with this little chart, and the chart would show me what the reproduction ratio is. So maybe I was shooting, I don't know, 5:4, so the camera's further away. I fill the frame with this chart. It will show me the reproduction ratio, which I then pass across onto the barrel of the lens. Very, very fine gradations. That has fine-tuned the optical layout for that actual distance. It makes a massive difference, given that if you're photographing something of a 35mm format, you've got about 0.2 of a millimeter of depth of field with most small sensors. Anything with maybe a 4 micron sensor or 4 micron pixel, you've got about 0.2 of a millimeter of depth of field. So it's amazing. Now you probably notice that this is set up on a bellows. The reason why it's on a bellows is because there is no focusing mount inside the lens. So it's very similar to a Digitar type lens or a Digaron type lens that's most used with medium format, or similar to maybe an enlarging lens. There is no focusing mount inside, so therefore you need to attach it to a technical camera or a bellows system, or you could use extension tubes. This is a combination between a bellows and a focusing mount, but the lens bit on the end is attached by means of the V-groove fitting. Lots of adapters for lots of different cameras, but there's a V-groove mount that allows the lens to attach nice and solid. Now the lens has got an 82mm image circle, so it's really big. Now that means you don't just have the choice of using 35mm cameras. You can use any camera that has a shutter, because the shutter isn't inside the lens, which can include the medium format cameras with a focal plane shutter, or a medium format camera that has an electronic shutter. So that encompasses the medium format Fujis, the focal plane shutter, but also the Hasselblads with their electronic shutter when you're not using the Hasselblad lens. So image circle 82mm, which also means you have lots of creative possibilities for perspective correction and for control of depth of field. So the other thing that's really really useful about this is a 105. Now the advantage with 105 means that even if you're focusing at 1:1, at 1:1 you have 9 centimeters of space. You're not absolutely right on top of your subject. That gives you space to be able to put lights in. That makes a really big difference. The camera is not casting a shadow, so 9 centimeters of space. If you're wondering about how to put a medium format system onto this, then there are manufacturers who make a larger bellow system which will allow you to attach 35mm all the way through to medium format. Even the largest sensor, 100 megapixel sensor, there's loads and loads of movement with something like, for instance, a NovaFlex bellows for perspective correction and for control of depth of field. So control of depth of field because we might want to put tilt in. The aperture range on this lens goes from 5.6 to f16. Most macro lenses seem to stop down more. However, they limit the aperture range because all available apertures perform absolutely at their very best. They don't give you an aperture that doesn't perform at its very, very best. So this lens is there for those who want to exceed the performance of their existing lenses for any distance closer than 1 meter. This, if you want the very, very best, is just amazing. Whether you're photographing negatives or anything close up within science or art history, there are many, many possibilities with this lens. There's lots of technical information online. You can download free of charge the charts that give you the reproduction ratios. It's absolutely worth looking at. I hope this makes sense. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.